Yeah, I love that word compass point. If you that could be a great foundation for every stage of parenting. Let me be the compass point, and what support scaffolding does my kid need at this developmental stage to help that compass point be on track, right? Compass point of like safety, security, right? Attachment needs, but also growth of an authenticity space, right? So that's a great visual. So if you think of that as as your base, your starting point of compass point, or your safe, secure nest, whatever that visual means for you. And then every stage, so you're a toddler and you're having a meltdown because you want chocolate before bed or whatever, you want the toy at the store. If I tip over and I then dysregulate and I go into this like, stop it, or this right space, I've lost compass point. Compass point is, I see that you're having a hard time.
Welcome to the Relationship Psychologist podcast.
Tune in every Thursday to learn with us as we interview experts.
And laugh with us as we banter about friendship.
And take action by implementing the tools and advice we provide to you each week to level up your personal relationships.
I'm Dayna Mullen.
And I'm Alicia Hinger.
We are soul sisters, besties, and psychologists on a mission to change the culture of relationships.
Your journey to becoming more supported and connected starts
right now.
All right, we're back.
Hello.
We've done a podcast just the two of us for a while, actually.
I know, it's been a minute.
Right? We've had these amazing guests, but this is kind of fun too.
It is. It is.
Yeah.
Okay, excited.
So let's today's about parenting, but we're going to be honest and a little vulnerable, I think, today and tell some of our stories. And I could spend hours talking about the mistakes I've made as a parent for sure. So if you're listening to this podcast, listen with grace. We're going to offer all of you as well. This is what we know and what we've known from the mistakes we've made about parenting and our own stories, and being parents.
Yeah, I think it's important, Alicia. I know lately you and I consult back and forth all the time, but I've had lots of clients recently who have been shocked when I tell them my experience with parenting, or even relationship wise, like with my husband. They're like, kind of put you on a pedestal, and I thought you kind of had your shit together, like you knew what to do. And I was like, no, honestly, like this is how we learn, is through going through these mistakes. And although we have all of this knowledge, we still make mistakes in our relationship. So I think it's good for us to be able to chat about what are the things that we've done, that we've learned, that are so good and helpful, and also where we've grown along the way, of where maybe we've made mistakes, and how we've grown from them.
Yeah. And to say we're still growing. Like relationship wise, we know we do this for a living. So, but obviously then as well, parenting wise, right? Like my kids are a little bit older than you, so I've been doing it a little bit longer than you have, but I'm still learning every single day. Like I always say, my first kid, I'm a rookie. And so everything he's doing through time and space, I'm learning with him and making mistakes. And with the second kid, I know a bit more. So with the third kid, a bit more. So yes, I'm still a rookie parent. I'm raising a 19-year-old for the first time in my life.
Yes.
Making mistakes.
Yes, I love that. I love that. I know when I was kind of getting some ideas together for this podcast, I was like thinking back to each kid. So I have 3 kids, and the first kid was not planned. And so everything was a shock. Yeah. And then the second one was much more conscious, but that's also when we started doing PAC training. So it kind of blew my mind. And then the third one is finally where it was like, oh, we've got this. Like the third is where there was some confidence.
Nice. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so you're rookie to like, what's the in-between stage? And now you're a veteran.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and it's funny, we say that, and yet we're still growing and we're still learning.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. When you think back, because you were first, when you think back to when you and your hubs decided to have a baby, and like go back, because I know we just had a podcast with Kara talking about Baby Bomb, and you and I didn't have those books back then. And you've always been steps ahead of me in every part of our journey together, even knowing each other. So I don't think I've ever asked you this. So tell me and tell our listeners, when you decided to have your first child, what prep work did you and Jay do? Like, did you guys have any of these discussions around like what's coming and what was changing?
I mean, it's embarrassing to say not really. I think we literally was just like, okay, let's have a kid. I remember holding one of my friends, little baby Alyssa, and she was like this adorable little tiny little thing in my hands. And I was like, I want one of these. This is really cute. And she's sweet, sweet. And she was like a day old. That was the smallest baby I've ever, that's the only baby I've ever held up to that point. I went home, was like, we need one of those. And 9 months later, pretty much, Drew was born. Drew is a whole story. That's another podcast, but like Drew was literally conceived, I swear, in a sweat lodge. Like it was a really spiritual, that whole conception story is a really cool story we can talk about later. But, you know, I think we talked about the generals being naive. We were the first people in both of our families to have kids. I didn't babysit too many kids. Like I wasn't around. I didn't have cousins that had kids. It wasn't like a family structure of like, this is what this looks like and how to change. So Kara's book, when I was reading through, was like, all these moments I was like, I wish I would have talked about that ahead of time with my husband. Like, you know, how are we going to manage our careers? So we both had these careers and we both just naively thought we fit this child in here somewhere and we'd figure it out. We would do like the daycare, the thing or whatever, or we would take turns taking the kid to school right. That was kind of our thought. That is not what happened. What happened was I took on the parenting role and his schedule didn't change at all. His 6 days a week, 15 hours a day didn't change. And I was like, oh, and then about 6 months in, I was like, so when I'm going back to work here now, what is our plan? And it became, you know, we had to go to therapy. Was there some points of contention in there? So we didn't make very good plans. So that's one of my biggest, you know, take homes now, people that are listening, is have that talk with your partner. Like I love, you do too, our premarital couples that come in and we talk about these hard conversations, kids, finances, managing thirds, all the things that, you know, you don't talk about when you're in the rainbow sunshine part of your relationship, but it would have saved us a lot of fights and it would have had some clarity. Because I think, you know, I always wanted to raise my kids with intention. I knew that early on. And we had that discussion, like, what are our values? What are our goals? We did those discussions, but how are we going to raise kids with intention, also having intention in our relationship? And so that kind of put on the back burner and was about how to raise this kid, or how are you going to raise this kid while I go to work? It was through trial and error and a lot of bumpy roads that we figured stuff out. Where I know you and Dennis were very different. You were much more intentional about doing things. And
Yeah. And I think because our story was different too. You and Jay were childhood friends, really close friends. So you'd known each other. And so you had a different relationship. You guys had a depth to your relationship that also you maybe didn't feel like you had to have some of the conversations because you'd known each other so long. Whereas for my husband and I, Dennis and I, we met very quickly, got engaged, got married within a year. And then 5 years later, we're pregnant. So we were ready, but we didn't plan it. And our whole relationship was very protected, I want to say. Like I didn't have the term couple bubble back then, but we made decisions based on what was good for us. Our wedding was just us. We eloped, you know, whatever we wanted to do, we decided together. So when we got pregnant, I remember being very conscious around the fact that we didn't let a lot of outsiders into changing our perspective of how we wanted to raise this child. So our parents' perspective, we were like, okay, we'll listen, but we'll talk about it. Even when I would talk to you, you would say, oh, try this. And I would say, oh, Den, Alicia said to try this. And we would talk about it together. So I feel like we always had that bubble that that Stan talks about. And that was very different.
Yeah. And we know more. Like, right, we're teaching this to our people now. I mean, I love being able to teach by example and be like, here's the things that I did wrong. And here's things that I learned from. And so here's some of my knowledge. And then here's the research that we now have, and having that bubble, that collaborative bubble where you're like, it's our child. How do we want to raise it? And what influences do we want to take information from? Guides, friends, books, resort podcasts now, whatever. And then have a discussion about that. And how do we want to raise this kid with our couple bubbles, intention, values, integrity intact? Yeah. So that's a beautiful, amazing, great start to take home. And then within that, my brain goes to all the things like, you know, I think one of the things I hear often in my office with all ages of kids is like discipline. Is how do we discipline? How do we, you know, change our child's behavior? And I was thinking about this morning. One of the things that my son said early, I think I was pregnant. Like, I think I was pregnant with my daughter. So he wasn't even 2, maybe. Like he talked early, walked, which I thought was normal. I thought at 10 months old, running around was normal because that's what he did. Like, he was at the pool at his first birthday, jumping off the diving board. And people were like, what? I'm like, that's not normal behavior for a 1-year-old. Like, he was just that kid. So at a young age, I gave him a timeout, which is what we did back then for something. I don't know what. And he walked into his room and I kind of walked after him and I was ready to close the door, whatever I was going to do. He's like, Mommy, God didn't give you kids to put them in timeout, and gave me this little look. And I was like, and more than once I would burst into tears with that kid, but he would say things to me and I would be like, oh, he's right. Oh my God. And so I would pause and have to collaborate in my own head and be like, okay, what am I going to do about that? And I remember leaving the bedroom and being like, maybe he's right. That's a good, this doesn't feel good to me either. So I went back in his room and like collaborated with my 2-year-old about, you know what, you're right. Let's do a time in. And I didn't know what even that term was back then. And so I sat on his floor in his bedroom and said, you can't leave your bedroom. You still have to wait for 5 minutes because whatever he did was, inappropriate or whatever. And I was like, but mommy's going to sit on your floor for 5 minutes with you. And he was like, okay, mommy. And I was like, well, that was a massive switch. And then from then on, we did time ins. I even with my kids, I remember making my kids do time ins when they were little together. We had these like tiles on our floor, these big tiles, and they just sit each in a tile and they couldn't leave the tile. They had to wait in that little tile together. At the end, they had to hug it out. They would roll their eyes. Time in to me started like when he was, but I didn't learn that in a book. I learned that from my kid.
I love that. I mean, there's a couple of things that you said that I want to tap into. And okay, first off, what you said that you were like you were part of my tribe also. So backing up for a second, when you're having kids and at that beginning, when you have a role model couple or friends that have older kids, you get to learn from them and they get to be part of your tribe and your community. So I remember part of the reason why I think Dennis and I had a better starting point was because of you and Jay. Like we got to watch you. So I wanted to add that really quickly because I think that's really important. And then the other advice that you gave me early on, which collaborates with what you're saying, was be intuitive. You didn't use that word, but you said, Dayna, forget what the book says. Just go with what feels right. It doesn't matter what anybody else says. Go with what feels right. And sometimes I feel like, but I don't know what feels right. Like right now, I don't know. But it was like just that guidance from you of like, just do what feels right and listen. And that's what you did with Drew, with your first, was you just listened to him and you let him help guide you in this role. It's mind-blowing to me because when we become a parent, your life changes immediately in that moment. I mean, it changes for the woman when they're pregnant because your body's changing and you're growing with this little being, but you haven't met them yet. And then they come out and you're like, hi, how are you? Oh my goodness, I love you. I love at first sight. Yes, there's such a thing. It's called having a child. For most people, not everybody has that same experience, but for a lot of people, they do. And then it's, I want to get to know you. What do you need from me? Oh, you need me to sit with you. Okay. Okay. What else do you need from me? And you did that with Drew really early on. You were intuitive and you were in his presence and in his energy and you listened. That I think is a really big take home, Alicia, is that you listened. You didn't go off of some self-righteous belief that you were all knowing or that the book knows or that somebody else that you're going to, that we're like training a dog. You intuitively just listened to him.
And I think, my biggest regrets when I look back at my parenting mistakes was when I didn't listen to that intuition, when I didn't listen to him and my relationship. And I was like, oh, but sometimes I should do it like this. And then I would try that. And then I'd be like, it would feel wrong in my body. And then I would switch and be like, okay, that feels better. Every single time I would not listen to our relationship and that attunement, and I listened to a book or a person or advice, and it would bump up against me. And I was like, this doesn't feel right. And I think, one of what I brought to parenting early on was like, loved my parents, I did the best I could, but I didn't want to feel like I did as a kid. I didn't want to feel like most of the teenagers later on, but as a teenager, I remember 100% believing that I was like the devil, because that's what they said. The devil lives in you, religious beliefs. Therefore, we should probably send you away to a convent to pray the devil out of you because it must be the devil that makes you behave. And so I was like, I am really bad. So people will say, I went into parenting thinking I was a really bad kid and a really bad teenager. Like I was a horrible teen. And I still have some beliefs that I was a bad teenager. And so early on when I had kids, I was like, here's this little beautiful being and they're going to act bad, whatever that is. They're going to act out sometimes for sure. But I never want my kid to feel like they're a bad human. I want them to be like, my mom doesn't like my behavior. My behavior maybe sucked, but my mom loves me no matter what. Like my mom knows I'm a good human and there's a good human. So I was always like, I see you behind your behavior. And that's hard because, especially with teenagers now when they're little and they're cuter, it's maybe sometimes easier, but they're a lot of work. But now I'm like raising these big toddlers in some ways that have bigger behaviors. And I'm always like, there's a human behind that behavior. So even when they were little, like I think, back to those moments in time when my kids were little, and there was moments where I was like, again, that first kid, like he was a classic, if we would have diagnosed him ADHD for sure, but just a busy, and I was like, I don't want to diagnosis behavior, I want to be behind that little behavior, this busy, non-stopping, super curious, super insightful, super intuitive. I want to establish that relationship with that intuitive kid, because if we can collaborate, so it's a process for me of like collaboration. And from day one, the minute, like you said, the minute they come out of our bellies, you're like, hello, other little human. Now you're separate from me. The second they're born, it's a process of letting go. Oh, right. It's that. And so as I'm right, saying that, it's my daughter's 17th birthday today. I'll get emotional thinking, like, literally, there's balloons in my living room right now that she's 17 years old today. And it's a process of every moment of every day, a process of letting them go into what? Into their own autonomy.
Yes.
Right? Their own best service of self. And if I don't see that in them every single day, I see in you the light, the joy, the human, the spirit, the energy that is beautiful that you are behind whatever behavior you're doing. How can I grow that in them? How can I grow them into autonomy if I don't always see that in them?
And definitely, Alicia, I know you and I have talked about this recently, where, I had a talk even with my teenager who's almost 16, and this idea that, you were my baby, and I nurtured you, and I took care of you, and I did everything for you because you were an infant and couldn't do anything. And then you were this little toddler, and I helped guide you as much as I could from getting hurt or whatever it was. And then you were this like child, and then this tween, and now this teen, and understanding that although I'm growing, I'm still me as an adult, but this little being is changing and evolving and growing. And thus our relationship is changing and evolving and growing, and acknowledging that. And that was something I don't feel like we talk enough about the grief that you feel as a parent when your child is growing. And I can still remember visually, I can remember you coming over and holding my oldest, Emma, who's almost 16, for the first time. And you just started bawling. Like, you couldn't stop crying because you were like, mine isn't this size anymore. And it was just so overwhelming. And I remember thinking like, oh, that's a big response for this. And I get it now, because we grieve each of these stages. And and I had a conversation with my daughter about this, saying, I want you to know, I understand our relationship is changing, and I'm trying to navigate it too. You were the first one who made me a mom, and I'm learning and growing with you. And so I want you to know, I want to be, as you're getting older, I want to be more of your guide and your confidant and your compass point of like, I want you to know I always have your back, which she's always known. But as you're growing and evolving, our relationship is changing also. And that's okay. Our relationship should change, and we're navigating it together.
Yeah. I love that word, compass point. That could be a great foundation for every stage of parenting. Let me be the compass point. And what support scaffolding does my kid need at this developmental stage to help that compass point be on track, right? Compass point of like safety, security, right? Attachment needs, but also growth of an authenticity space, right? So that's a great visual. So if you think of that as your base, your starting point of compass point, or your safe, secure nest, whatever that visual means for you. And then every stage, so you're a toddler and you're having a meltdown because you want chocolate before bed or whatever, you want the toy at the store. If I tip over and I then dysregulate and I go into this like, stop it, or this right space, I've lost compass point. Compass point is, I see that you're having a hard time. The compass is, I see that behind that temper tantrum is my beautiful, autonomous, starting to grow into autonomy child who doesn't know that this is irrational, because their brain has one neuron running around up there, right? So I'm gonna hold the compass point of rationality, compass point of security, the compass point of safety, and be like, and boundaries, which is love.
Yes.
You don't get the toy.
Yes.
You don't get whatever the thing is. The answer is still no. The boundary is still there. But I'm not gonna veer off and be and join you in that dysregulation, to stay in that regulated state of like, I see that you're hurting, or I see that you want the toy, and they're gonna roll their eyes and they're gonna say all their things and their toddler voices, and I'm gonna stay secure and be like, it's okay. I love you enough to say no, and I love you enough to say yes when I need to say yes. Like, I love you enough to hold compass point of safety and security, and then that translates all the way into teenage years, to the here and now.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah. And
hard.
And that is. Oh yeah, that is hard. I was going to say, the thing, I think my biggest learning moment as a parent is understanding that my ability to self-regulate myself and stay in that, if we're going to use that word, compass point, right? Like, to stay grounded in my self energy, in who I am, and for sure we are going to get reactive. This is not a perfection bar. This is the idea is if I can lead with relief, if I can stay in this calm energy presence and just be with my child, whether that's they want the toy or they're having the tantrum even, right? Because when they're young, that's what it is. And I remember just I would pick up my child and leave the situation. I remember doing that. Some people would let them stay and do it, but ideally staying as much as I could grounded in I've got you, I've got you, I've got you, understanding the neurobiology and the psychobiology, right, of the child, that they're in a fight or flight or freeze response. I need to be safe and social. I have to be in that regulated state to say, it's okay, I've got you, until their nervous system relaxes and gets back into safe and social. And then we can talk and say, I know you really want that toy. And maybe we could put that on your Christmas list or your birthday list.
Yeah.
And I'm going to validate you and see into you and understand you, but not when you're dysregulated. When you're dysregulated, I need to just be really calm and validating and soft.
Yeah. And I think what you just said, like I hear this from parents, and even in my own anxieties with teenagers, it's very much the exact same thing. But my fear is they'll be madder longer. So when I say no, toddler, they're going to go over it in 5 seconds, probably. They don't hold grudges. My teenagers hold grudges and they remember stuff for a long period of time. And so I have lots of examples in my head I can think about of when I've said no to something, taking, whatever the reason is, said no to, a video game or an event or a party, whatever it is. But when I stay in that secure space, having said no and it feels just bigger, like because they're in a bigger body, bigger energy, bigger voice, bigger words. It feels like a bigger dysregulation of the relationship or disruption of the relationship. But actually, when I've stayed in that place of like, I know you think this is a bad choice and it's okay. And I'm open to talk about it. Like my nest is still safe and secure and you're allowed to have your big feelings and you're allowed to be mad at me every time. And I'm still surprised they come back and they're like, thanks, mom. And I'm like, wow. Like you're mad about the thing I said no about, or you're mad about the thing that whatever we were disagreeing about. But every time they come back and they say thanks, and it blows my mind still to this day. And this is like our dinner table discussion with my partner. I think if anything I could say to parents raising teenagers is resist the urge to give them advice. It's what we say in our office too, but resist the urge to give them advice because they don't want to hear it. And they especially don't want to hear about your stories of like, well, when I was your age, they don't want to hear those stories. They're going to roll their eyes and they're going to tune you out and be like, whatever, instantly. What they want to hear is, I hear you.
Yes.
And that your experience, your frustration, your fears, your whatever they're going through is maybe different than mine. Maybe it's the same. Who knows? But they don't care. They want to hear, I hear you, I see you, and you matter. And your opinion, even though I might not agree with it, but your pain, whatever you're going through matters to me. And I'm going to make space for that. And even when we disagree, and you go, like when Winter storms after her room and she's mad about something at the dinner table, and I make space to be like, I know, I understand you're upset and I know that that's hard for you, and make space for her. I go back in there 5 minutes later and she's like, thanks, mom. Thanks for just making space. I'm like,
oh,
wow.
I love that.
Every time. Or the odd time do we have a negotiation. So we have, my house, we have trying to negotiate with these young adults now of like, okay, well, this has to get done, or this, we don't get to do this first. So if don't do your like litter box duty or whatever, you don't get to play video games. And I'll come home and he's playing video games or something. And I'm like, so I'll just unplug it. And then I'm like, and then he has this big, like, oh, I was in the middle of the game. And I'm like, I know, the rule. I just try to stay that calm. And I can see he's steaming mad. There's like a vein popping out of his head. And then 5 minutes later, he's like laughing. He does his chore and he's back in there and he's laughing. It's no big deal. Cause it's not I don't get emotional. I'm just like, it's our agreement. You broke the agreement. So I'm going to hold you to the agreement. And it's not personal. Like when my kid forgets to do his chores with his crazy distracted brain, it's actually nothing to do with me. Like that's a huge, like every day I come home and like dishes are right now, I can see them in the sink. That's not him being an asshole to me on purpose. He's a really loving kid. He literally has maybe 2 neurons most days, right? He's a lovely human being. And he's focused on getting to work this morning with his dad. Like he's focused on hurry up, get out of the house at 6 a.m. They're not right having a birthday party this morning. So I'll leave the dishes there till I get home from school and be like, get or work today, get out, put your dishes away. But it's not personal. Like if we can stand in that compass of like, what is our intent? Like, what is our intent of raising these kids? And their behavior is their own stuff. And at every stage of development, the kid wants the toy in the store. Your toddler's having a meltdown, not because you're a bad parent. Stop owning their behavior. Not because you're bad. They're having that meltdown because they're tired. They're hungry. They want that toy. Their friends have that toy. Everyone has a cell phone. I want to, whatever it is, right? Or they're distracted because they're got a busy brain like my kid does. It's not personal. And so how can I hold the compass of, I'm not going to be like, that's it. It's too hard. I forget it. I've done all the things in the world to try to correct this behavior. I'm going to keep trying. because that's my,
Yeah.
I signed up to keep trying and to keep going with you. The day I decided to have you, I decided this is going to be, I'm in for the long haul, which is why we need to
Yeah.
keep.
And yes. And I like you were kind of speaking to Alicia that now it's a lot more maybe settled in and understood and spoken, that there is some agreements in your family, right? Like in our family, like we do our chores, or we are accountable to each other, or we are respectful. When they're toddlers, we don't have those as much. We're trying to instill that, and that's language that I know that my husband and I have always used, and we use it with our kids when something happens. And I'll say this to my 6-year-old, she might act a certain way, and I'll say, do we do that in our family? And she's like, no, we don't. And I'm like,
Okay.
so we shouldn't do that then, because it's not what we do, and it's hurtful. And she's like, oh, okay. And so that idea of like these agreements, same as how we have them as a couple, but we have them as a family as well. And those, I know our motto in our family has always been, we'll have each other's back no matter what. So our kids have always heard, it doesn't matter what it is, I'm going to have your back. Like that's the way that we do things. And so what I found is, there was a period of probably a year and a bit where my oldest didn't tell me very much, and didn't want my advice and didn't want to hear anything. And I was like, that was the grief of like feeling, a bit of shutdown of like, oh, this sucks. But now into, she wants to know, and she wants to know my experiences, and she wants to know how to navigate things, and she's asking my advice. So some kids can come full circle and come to the other side of it. And then that's amazing. Then you get to be that guidepost again, right? That compass point of like, come to me and I won't have your answers, but I will give you what I know. And what I know is just my experience. Maybe it will serve you.
Yeah. Well, I think about that too. And so when your teenagers or kids are starting to pull away from you, again, there's like natural autonomy they're trying to create, which is what we want to instill in them. There's that piece of the puzzle. But there's also, if it feels in your heart, it feels in your gut, like this is a bit more than that. Like I feel like I'm losing them a bit. I always kind of question back and be like, well, because who do they go to, right? Who are teenagers? They're going to go to their peers. They're going to go to their peers. Like the kids are going to go to those who what have their relationships, those who get them, right? So and then I'm like, okay, well, if they feel like their friends get them more than I do, then there's a problem. If they feel like their peers get them more than I do, okay, then that's on me. That's like a radical inventory of how I show up my relationship with my kids. Instead of blaming, well, they're just teenagers and they're just hard, or they're just kids and whatever. Instead of that, pause and be like, I'm going to actually do the radical thing in an inventory of how I'm showing up. And am I nurturing that relationship? Like, am I nurturing it enough that my kids value my opinion? Am I nurturing enough that there's enough that they know that I get them? That I'm tuned in enough that they know that I get them. So they're like, I don't really want your advice, mom, but I know that you get me. So like, what would you do here? Right. So whenever my kids pull
Yes.
away, which they do certain times, I pause and have I been too busy? Have I been too neglectful? Have I been focused on other stuff at work, whatever? What can I do to nurture that relationship again? I'm not going to give them advice on their stuff. I want to nurture relationship so they turn back towards, just like with their heart.
Exactly. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And yeah, and it's sometimes it's just validating and it's even stating that, Alicia, where you just say, I know, I remember saying this to mine, saying, I know you're not going to tell me everything. And that's okay. I want you to know, I understand that you're becoming this person, that you're growing into this young woman. I want you to know I'm always here for you. And I do understand you. And then you do those little things. Like you said, you do that inventory of yourself. Okay, where could I show up a bit better? Am I being the best version of myself? Am I being the best mom that I can be, or dad, or whatever parent you are? And then altering that and seeing into your child, but not forcing them, because the minute that we try and get them to say, you need to come and sit and you need to talk to me and you need to do these things, you're going to get resistance in every relationship. So just meeting them where they're at, to say, I know you. I've known you since you came out of me. I know you. And so I know what's going on, and I love you and I support you, and I'm going to be there for you. And I'm going to show you that. And then eventually they come back around again.
They do. They do, because they feel known. They really feel known. They feel safe, even though it feels a little vulnerable, but they feel safe. And so if you say, I know you, they're like, no, you don't. Right. Then you lean back and go, don't argue that. Lean back and go, okay, what about that could be accurate? What about what they're saying could be their perception? And how could I eradicate that fear in them? How could I nurture that connection, that growth in our relationship again? How could I show them that I do know them? And the littlest things, right? I leave out their favorite food, or I leave out, I leave them a note, or I send them a text, or I send them a meme or whatever. Like I do things that I know serve that relationship because they're each individual and each unique. Like your mom, like right, she sends me those cookies that she knows that I love, and she brings them over once in a while. I'm just like, that goes right into my heart. It's not, I mean, they taste good, but her intention of like, oh, she understands. And from however long ago, I made a comment or somehow she knows that I knew that. And I'm like, that goes right into my core of like, she knows me. Those little things, that's what matters is nurturing those relationships.
Yes.
I really think that's how you get them to turn back towards you again. That's
Yeah,
relationship in general. I mean, isn't that,
it
that's
is.
about parenting, but isn't that relationships in general? Like if you're a boss of your coworkers or of your staff or whatever, how do you get them how do you get a good workplace? How do you create a good family environment? How do you create a good relationship with your partner? Being known, being seen.
And yes, and exactly, Alicia, and understanding that every person is different. Like this is why this manual approach of like,
Yeah.
do this sleep training with your child, and then do this, and then do this, and do this. It's like they're not a dog. We're not trying to train them for like some, I don't know what. This is a human that you have to intuitively get to know, like you did, starting with Drew, when he said, "This is not the way that it's supposed to be," and you're like, "Oh, okay, thank you very much, Mister." You know, it's like, I am going to understand you as this unique little being. I remember our mutual friend, Mariko, said to me once, she said, she said it in a more eloquent way, but she said, they're not yours. They're not
Oh,
your kids.
right.
They're not yours, Dayna. They're not yours to keep. They just chose you to help guide them. And I visualize kind of like a butterfly where it's like, you know, I've helped you kind of grow until you can fly on your own, and then you'll come back home when you choose to. But this idea that I'm understanding the uniqueness of who you are, and I'm helping you navigate life in whichever way you want to navigate it. And I'm just, again, going back to that compass point, I'm just your compass point. I'm home, but you're not mine to keep.
Ugh, that's huge. That's huge. And if you actually just like embody that right now, what would be different in your relationships that you're not mine to keep? You're here, and just even just to amplify that, the gift, just to pause and just to own like this is a gift. Like every day, let's not use the word hard anymore. Let's get rid of that. This raising teenagers is hard. Life is hard. Okay, sure. Let's get rid of that word. It's a gift and it's a challenge, and it's going to grow you in ways you've never expected. Like being a parent, in my experience, has been the most growth and evolution in my entire life. I love my job and I love everything, but being a parent has pushed all of those things and buttons in me and reparented some of my own parts in some really beautiful ways, more than anything else in the world. So what a gift. Like let's turn that heart into this is a gift, and gifts don't come easy. Gifts aren't free, right? They're not like, it's not like that. This is a gift of like, the more I get to put in, the more I get to grow, the more I get to evolve, the bigger the gift is. So
Yes.
why wouldn't I want to keep
Yes.
investing? It's an investment our relationship. It's an investment in myself. It's an investment in my future communities. Like it's the biggest return on investment you're going to have in your life. So
Yeah.
invest. My tattoo, invest well.
Yes. Yeah. And I feel like I agree. I think being a parent has been the biggest growth in anything that I've ever done also, because I feel like it also makes you reflect on your history all the time. Because if you notice what triggers you, if you notice what starts to upset you, you're like, where's that coming from? And then you're like, oh my gosh, that's like 9-year-old me, or that's like this thing that happened with a friend or a parent or whatever it is. And you're constantly, your kids are helping you grow into who you're becoming as well. Like it's this process. I feel like it's a parallel process of growth that we're growing alongside our children. And it is a gift. It's a gift. And so keep leaning into that growth and leaning into the idea that you don't have all of the answers. Also, there is no right way. Well, I don't know if I'd say there's a right way. There's a healthy way to do things. I think understanding the brain and the nervous system, and being able to feel the energy of your child and be intuitive and listen to them, there's some really amazing skills to help you along that journey.
Yeah, I think the most important of that is listening. Like just really listening, not to be right or to, but listening to understand, to then navigate together for sure. Okay, let's dive into. I'm just curious about what are some of the things that you've experienced. Like, what are some of the hardest parenting moments or lessons? Right off the cuff, I mean,
I
I get
know.
1,000. Okay, I'll tell you one of mine. I could tell you two, actually. I can tell you a really vulnerable one, but a funny one I think I've talked about before when, again, my kids were little and Drew was probably about 4. And so we talked about the sparkle jar, you shake the bar and you can watch the sparkles settle. So if your body gets busy or your brain gets busy or you're feeling dysregulated, we'd use the word like feeling like it's too many sparkles in the jar. You can take a second to let the sparkles drop. Well, one time we were driving the car and there was just too much sparkles in my jar. And I was driving and I was like, and my son even said, "Mommy, too sparkly?" And I'm like, "Yes." Yeah. And I was starting to dysregulate. And so I pulled the minivan over on this like side road. You know this story? I put on the side road by the university which no one ever drives on ever. I got out of the car and was just like walking around being like trying to like debrief so I didn't like yell at my kids. And a freaking cop pulled up right behind me. I was so embarrassed. And my kids were like seeing their little lights. And I'm like, he's like, "Ma'am, are you okay?" I'm like, I'm just trying to regulate the sparkles. And he's like, oh. I'm like, "Oh God." Just trying to like get myself in a state of regulation. And I think he thought I was probably half crazy. I'm like, "I promise we're good. I just don't want to yell at my kids. I'm trying to like just regulate the side of the road, like just regulate my system." And he was like, "Okay, well, have a good day." And I think he was just like crazy. So I've got many of those ones where I've had to like step aside, or my kids call me on it in public. If they could see me, like again, when they're little, they're embarrassing because they say stuff out loud. So your inside your home talk becomes outside of your home talk because they're little kids. And I'll be like, they could see me getting mad at something or something. And they're like, "Mommy, need to count to 5. Mommy, need your sparkle jar." And I'm like, "Shut up. Like, don't say that. People are looking at us right now." Lots of those.
Oh yeah. Yeah. As you say that, I mean, my third has been like that. I mean, she can, even when I'm not facing her, she can sense my energy. So she'll be like, "You're frustrated right now." And I'm like, "I'm not even looking at you." It's amazing. She's very, very intuitive. Although I think all of them are now because we've talked so much. I think that throughout our parenting journey, Dennis and I have really been open about how we're feeling and what's going on and noticing our kids, what's going on for them. So they've been able to attune and be able to understand, right? And so even if I'm excited, I'll clench my hands or I'll clench the steering wheel because I'm excited. And they're like, "Are you frustrated? Mom, you're frustrated." And I'm like, "Oh no, this is excited. It's very similar." And I love that. I mean, I don't think those are mistakes. I think those are like pluses, Alicia. Those are like good for you. You've shown your kids a skill, a tool, a way to visualize how to regulate with the sparkles, and you taught them how to attune to you, and you taught them how to notice. And these are the things that they don't learn in school. They don't learn about how to emotionally regulate. They don't, all they learn is leave. If you can't control yourself, get out. I mean, as couple therapists, when which is usually one of the couple says, "I'm out, like I don't want to do this anymore, like I need a break, I'm done." And then we punish and we're like, "You can't leave, that's abandonment." Well, I've learned my whole life to leave and to shut down. And so in essence, and same for me, for what I ended up teaching my kids as well, was attunement and self-regulating and co-regulating.
So where it turns into, some hard parenting is as they get older and then they recognize that they're the reason for my dysregulation. So there's been some hard moments in my, kids going through depression or like suicidal ideation, which that's common with teenagers. And then they see my face and I'm trying to like support and listen and make space. But it's obviously, we're human beings. Is when your child tells you that they don't want to live and you're like, "Okay, let's talk about that. And then pay back and be like, sorry that I caused you stress by saying," and I'm like, and you can't lie. You can't be like, "No, I'm fine. It doesn't, no, right." To be like, "Yeah, and yes, and like, I'm human. I'm going to feel my stuff, but I also really appreciate your truth. And we're going to navigate this together. Like my distress isn't because I'm not grateful that you told me. My distress is, how can I help you? Right. So there's these more like intuitive conversations now coming with my young adult children of like, "Sorry, I caused you distress, Mom. I don't want to be the cause of your distress." And I'm like, "Oh, that's painful to hear their little mouths sometimes, or their big little mouths sometimes." And having those conversations now. But again, that goes back to what we do with our adults in our office is like, sometimes I'm going to be the cause of your distress because I love you, because I care about you. So and then my role there was like, "Just give me a sec. Like, I'm feeling distressed, not because you're the cause, because I love you so much. And that's my own, and I'm grateful for that. And I'm still the parent here. So let me pause and think about and process and ask your dad and, you know, how I can serve you best. If you have any ideas, I'm open to yours, but if you're really lost, I'm going to come back with some answers. Like I'm going to come back to you with some resources because I'm still the parent. Like I'm always going to be in that parenting role. We're more collaborative now. Like, so we're moving from like full on parenting, full on structure to, you know, over time, less structure and more collaborative relationships, like more mentoring in some ways relationship, but I'm still the alpha in the herd. Like I'm still going to be a gentle alpha that if I don't know, I'm going to find out and come back to you. So you're still safe in my nest.
Yeah. And really, you're also role modeling. I feel like, Alicia, that, I mean, you're being a role model, first of all, but you're showing that there is no massive self-righteousness here, that I have all of the answers and I'm the all-knowing queen bee, or, you know, we know everything. It's like, we want to be that compass point, that safe place for you to come to. And we might not have all the answers, but we're going to come back to you and we're going to negotiate with you, or we're going to collaborate with you, and we're going to figure this out together. It's like, it becomes like, you know, when we have kids, it's like, you're my little people. You're part of my little tribe. And I'm your leader ish. Like that's my role for a while. And I'm learning how to be a leader because this is the first lead that I've been. And so but I'm going to see into you. I'm going to understand you. I'm going to learn you. I'm going to master you. And you're going to do the same with me. And we're going to figure out this stuff together. And we don't always have the answers. And I think that's one thing that kind of keeps coming up as we're talking about this. We don't always have the answers, even as psychologists who specialize in this stuff. We don't. Thankfully, we have each other and other networks of people.
Yeah. Which is why I think it's so important to have a community. Like as parents, I don't know where we get the idea we have to do all ourselves. It takes a community, and that's a true cliche, but it's true. And so as a parent, who do you have in your community that you can go to, that you can ask questions to, that you can, and again, we have lack right now of information. We have our cell phones and computers and podcasts, and, you know, so there was all those great resources. And then who else? Like, who can you go and be vulnerable with and be like, my kid's hurting, or I don't know what to do, or we're stuck in this dialogue, or we're stuck in this conference, you know, they have this boyfriend that I don't like, or whatever it is. Like, who can you go to that can support the relationship, right? And who also it doesn't matter, they don't have to align on all the things, but who aligns on your integrity and your parenting, because there's lots of different schools of thought. And again, people do it what they want to do. And I really believe that every parent is parenting from the place of love. Like I even think my parents did the best they could do, 100% from their place of love, from how they were parented. Right. And so we get to all make a choice now, what we want to bring from our family of origin and how I want to parent my kids. Some of that stuff was great. And some of that stuff I don't want to do at all with my kids. And so it's every person you're taking in, but having that community of people that you can, I really value people that I can look at and go like you, who value relationships so much, that are like, okay, let's break this down. Let's process, let's look through this. And then who else can we go to get some resources, some answers, some ideas? And which is why I think, man, we're such in a lucky time to have Zoom, to have, you know, resources now that weren't available, to ask intelligent questions and to keep networking and raising these kids, this next generation, with all of our love and support, not just one, you know, or two or three in the small community. Like,
yeah. Oh, it's huge. It's huge. I think finding for new parents, and usually I feel like usually they have groups of people who are having kids at the same time, and they are navigating it together. And, but finding those groups of people it's vital. I mean, because you change so much, especially as a first time parent, your life changes so much from I'm working and I have all this time to myself to I'm getting to know this little human being that, you know, it's a lot. And so to have that community throughout the whole years is amazing. I want to back up for a second because you asked me a mistake, and I actually have one that like rings true all the time to me. And we talk about it enough still now that it's not like traumatizing, but for sure, I'm going to say, first off, my emotional reactions was probably my biggest downfall as a parent. So I came from very passionate, loving parents who were very expressive. And so I learned to be very expressive in whatever it was. I could feel big. And so when my kids would make a mistake, I would, you know, not explode and be scary, but my reactions were always big. And so that was a mistake that I didn't realize, that I didn't know how to self-regulate early on. So that was a big growth thing for me. But the actual specific example was, and I can't remember what, I think my son was probably 4 or 5, and I think he had drawn on the wall, something like that. And I came in and I lost my shit. I was like, are you fucking kidding me? And I was mad. I was like, what is wrong with you? Did you forget to turn on your brain? Did you forget to turn on your brain? And that's what I kept saying to him. I looked at him, I was like, you just didn't turn on your brain today, did you? And then I walked away because I was so mad. I was like, oh my gosh, oh my gosh, oh my gosh. And I like was standing like this. If people can see, I was like, oh my gosh, that was really bad. That was really bad. I need to do something about this. So I started walking back towards his room, and he had a bathroom in his room, his own bathroom. And I saw him standing on his little stool, looking in the mirror going, I just didn't turn on my brain. I just forgot to turn it on. And I was like, oh, I could even cry just talking about it. I'm like, oh my God. I was like, I ran in. I was like, oh my God, sweetie, I'm so sorry. That was wrong. That was wrong of me to say that. Your brain is always on. I'm so sorry. And now we can lovingly joke about that, because we've repaired it a lot. But that, like, I would slip up and say those things. I would say the wrong thing in the moment because I was aroused and I was in fight or flight. And that is probably the biggest skill that I've learned at being a human, is how to regulate myself and how to stay in a safe social place and calmer, and but also repair quickly. So when I do make a mistake, which I still make mistakes, I still say the wrong thing sometimes, not that bad. I don't say it that bad anymore, but I do repair really quickly, and I validate and I see into. So there's my little big mistake.
I think lots of parents can relate to that. We say things off the cuff because we're so enraged or so triggered by whatever and you pause and go, oh, I've been there, done that 1,000 times over. So just, to piggyback that, if you're in a parenting group or you're creating your community, throw away judgment, like throw it out the door and throw away comparison, because it doesn't matter. We're all doing the best we can do. And so by throwing judgment, you're just going to start to shrink your community down and shrink down the love that you have for each other into this place that feels rigid and gross. So get rid of those two things, first of all, and open the door to grace and space. And like you said, repair. Like I say sorry to my son more than probably normal people do, because I'm always like, I could have done that better, sorry. And then because I'm a therapist, I'm in my office talking about this all day long, and I'm like, oh, I have that to Drew. So I'm like home, I'm like, remember that thing when you were 3, Drew, and I took you to that daycare and you hated it there, and I'm so sorry, like I pulled you up, but not fast enough. And he's like, Mom, like, no, I just want you to know, like, someday when you're in therapy and you're really angry about, whatever this thing is, I'm like, I own it now. I'll own it forever. It's on the table. You can come back. Like, he's always like, oh my God, Mom. But I'm repairing in the moment whenever I can. But I'm also thinking about things on a regular basis, because we do this for a living. And I'm come back and I'm like, remember that thing that happened? And he's like I have 2 really bad stories of funny things that again, it talks to like our humanness. So they're very similar stories. So one was with a bear, because I'm pretty regulated when stressed. And stress doesn't, I worked in a jail. Like there's lots of people can think those, I'm pretty calm that way. But for some reason, bears and snakes can trigger me pretty quick. And so my son and I were hiking in Montana in the mountains, and I did this big long hike. And it was at the end of the day, it was just him and I having like a date time together. We're doing building a relationship, and it was such a great day. And I actually had to lie about his age to get him on the hike, because he's supposed to be, I think 13, and he was only like 10 or something. Anyway, so we're walking on the hill, and the guy thought it'd be really funny to put on this like really bad bear costume that didn't even look real, looking back, but jumped out of the bush at us. And I literally like walking beside my kid, dove into the bush and left my kid on the path. And I remember as I'm diving being like, sorry. Right. And to this day, he's like, remember that time, Mom, that you were like, I was going to be eaten by the bear? I did the same thing with the snake. The exact same scenario. Snake came out, and I literally I almost broke his arm because I jumped so hard I pushed him into the wall towards the snake as I was jumping. And so I have to own that I'm like, dude, I love you. And I think I say I would take a bullet for you, but if it's a bear or a snake, you're probably on your own. And I'm so sorry to even say that out loud. That sounds like a horrible thing, but you have to own, like, I'm not perfect. I'm super imperfect, and I love you to the death. When my logical brain is on board, I'm fully taking a bullet for you. But when I go offline and I'm in fight or flight, I'm self-protective. And you've seen me in 2 instances now that's been real. And I had to like repair that with him a lot, because he was like, Mom, I'm like, I'm sorry for like years, like even to this day. Like years later, I'd be like, remember that bear? He'd be like, yeah, we'll talk about it at dinner tonight. He'll be like, oh yeah, I remember that. I'm like, I'm sorry.
But what I love about what you're saying, Alicia, is that you're showing the human and your own stuff too, right? That there are these things that I'm scared of. I still run away from bees and scream, and people laugh at me, and I'm like, I own it. I love it. It doesn't. They sting me, so I'm gonna run away. But it's like they get to know these little. Although this is a protection thing, this has never really happened where it's been a real bear and you've actually done that. And who knows what would really happen? Maybe you would still jump out of the way, but he's getting to know the human of you. And again, not being perfect and making mistakes and repairing is it's the essence of what a secure relationship is, right? I mean, we are teaching our kids collaboration, mutuality, fairness, and justice. It's like, I want you to see who I am. I want to talk about this. I want you to feel like you can tell me. Like, you come in and you say, I'm sorry, when you were 3, I did this thing. And he's like, I don't remember. But there's going to be times where our kids are going to come to us, maybe in adulthood even, and say, do you remember that time you did that? And we're going to go, no, because our memory doesn't. But we're going to do the secure thing, which is, I'm going to validate that. I'm going to take full accountability for that. And I'm going to reassure, do whatever is needed to make sure that you know that I see you, hear you, understand you. And I'm really sorry for how I made you feel, even if I don't remember that, because there's going to be the likelihood that we're not going to.
Yeah, for sure. Lots of those times. And because behind that, they're not looking for, they're not looking for to blame us. They're looking for connection, probably. Right. There's a bit of a rupture for them. And they're bringing that up, which is a chance for us to not go, well, I did it because of this, this, and this. Put that aside and go behind that again and be, what's my goal? What's my goal? Parenting, connection. And so if I have a chance to go, I don't remember that, but clearly it's bugging you, or it hurt your feelings, and I'm sorry. I would never try to hurt you on purpose. And then we can open the door to discussion. So what was your experience, or why was I doing, right? Secondly, but first and foremost, validate for connection. Listen to understand.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. What, I feel like people always ask us as well, although we just had Kara on the podcast. So we have, we've talked about baby bomb, but what other books or theorists are big ones for you? I'm sure you and I have the same ones, but is there ones where you're like, okay, once I learned that shifted things for me? Like, which would be the ones for you?
Yeah, well, the obvious ones that we talk about lots are like Dan Siegel, for sure. So his Whole Brain Child, and then later on Brainstorming for Teenagers. So Dan Siegel's work. And then, of course, Gordon Neufeld, or any really, I have a bit of a attachment system relationship with myself. So we have to attach to be safe and secure. So we are pretty dependent little beings when we're born, right? So a baby's born, they're dependent on their caregivers to keep them alive, literally, just like an animal in a herd. They need the herd to keep them alive originally. And so we attach, and ideally in the perfect world, we'd attach to a system that also allows for this messy authenticity down here. But often our environment isn't that way. So we attach and we have to fit boxes to stay safe and secure. So whether it be religious, cultural, school, family of origin, whatever, there's 1,000 boxes that we have to fit into to feel safe and secure, to evolve, to grow, to be fed, whatever, in school, in our communities, all this stuff, right? And so that's the kind of my beef with attachment, is like, I get it. I understand the science behind it and I understand it, but it also creates then this dismissal of my authenticity. If I can't be my authentic self here, because I have to relinquish that, I have to abandon that part of myself to fit in here. I've got to abandon my free spirit to fit the rules. I got to abandon my messiness to look clean, to go to whatever, sit in a certain, environment, this church or whatever it is, right? Okay. I had to abandon myself that was messy, because I was like, being messy means I'm the devil. Okay. So I didn't, thank God. I just then detached. I detached from my attachments. That's what I had to do. I had to make a choice as an adolescent to be like, either I attach and I fit the mold, and I tried really hard to fit the mold because I wanted to fit that mold, and it was too rigid for me. It just wouldn't fit. And at some point I had to like break through those barriers to get into my authenticity. So I think any theorist like Gabor Mate talks about authenticity lots, any theorists or books or, teachers or authors that talk about understanding the attachment system, because it really is biologically wired into us for survival, and how vital that is. And as a parent, to understand what those attachment, starting from like, our senses. We start with just our, we attach through smell, taste, touch, smell, sound, sight, those things first, and then sameness, and then belonging, and then but the deepest one being that deep knowing. And what's the biggest wound we see in our offices really is not being known. That's really the belonging or worth. Kind of, they all fit into that bottom center of like, I couldn't fully be known or fully feel my worth, which is authenticity, because I had to abandon that to fit a box. And so I think the evolving of knowing those attachment systems and then evolving to how can I create a secure space, attachment space for my child that also allows them to be their messy, authentic selves within the boundaries of love. And so any theorist that you like, so I love monks for that reason, right? I love the Dan Siegel, the science and the whole brain child and the Gordon Neufeld attachment systems. But then I love anything to do with authenticity, which is, for me, the Gabors, any monk kind of stuff, any kind of spirituality, any kind of like Buddhist-y, anything that's in that realm of spirituality, which is our authentic self. How can I bring that in? Which makes the parenting space wider and more expansive, a little wigglier, sometimes a little messier. But you got, like I said, if you throw away the judgment of like, yeah, my kid's going to dye their hair purple and wear black nail polish. And my parents are like, or someone's parents are like, or my kid's going to do it. But you're like, it's okay, because they're not breaking the container of our attachment systems. Like we have some safe, secure rules here, and they're going to pierce their ears. Like my kid, so disclosure, she's 17 years old, got a tattoo last night. That was her birthday present. She got a tattoo birthday. Right? It's not our first tattoo. Let's be honest about that. We did the COVID family tattoo. We all got the COVID family. Where is it? Right here, our family crest. We got that one during COVID. But so, and some people will be like, "Oh my God, that's terrible," and it's fine. And that's how. And if you would ask me like 10 years ago, I'd be like, "No, I would never let my kid tattoo their body till they're 18 and an adult." But now I'm like, we talked about it, and she's an artist, and that's how she expresses herself, and everything that her body, my body, she's drawn. So I'm like, you know what? This is her self-expression. My husband was kind of against tattoos for a while, and we had to have a dialogue about it. And I'm like, this is how she expresses herself, and how can we support her journey in life? And how can we support it in the container of like, okay, it can't be an obvious space, or how we have that dialogue with her. So that wiggliness of authenticity within the container of attachment systems, which is biologically wired into us to survive. But I don't want to just survive. I don't want my teenagers to survive anymore. Like my son last weekend, it sounds maybe dumb to some people, but it was his first time like driving to a concert. But, COVID he missed a lot of things during COVID, as every kid did, and it's significant. I want to emphasize that what they missed during COVID for those few years of things shutting down, like schools and activities and all the things. So now he's this 19-year-old, but in my mind, he's still like at least 2 or 3 years younger developmentally sometimes. So he's driving across the country to go to this concert, and I'm trying to be like, okay, my attachment mom wants to be like, I want to be like, did you get a place? Where are you staying? What's the address? What route are you going to take? Like, I want to know. I have to lean back and be like, how can I support you? What do you need from me? And also, hey, buddy, you know how I work, and I'm gonna be paranoid, and I'm gonna be worried the whole time. So how can we negotiate this? Like, I want to call you every minute. I'm like, so what's our He's like, how about I call you like twice a day? I'm like, thank you, I appreciate that, which is a lot because he's a teenager. He's like, I don't want to call you ever. Well, I'm going to call you twice a day, right? Or whatever. And then I'm going to be like, but also you have to keep your phone on so I can track where you're going to be. So just so I feel safe that I know that you're at the concert and you're at the hotel or wherever you're staying for sure. And we were actually friends this weekend with Ange and her daughter, Alyssa, who's the same age as my son. And it was actually interesting because we were in the car and Drew would check in, and Alyssa said to him, wow, Alicia's really worried about Drew. And Ange was like, see, we're all like that. So it was kind of validating for her daughter to see another parent being like, I'm sorry. I'd say to her, sorry, I'm just checking Drew's phone, making sure he's safe. And she was kind of like, oh, you do that too? I'm like, yep, I do that too. We negotiated an agreement of how much we're going to talk. But I'm sorry, I love him so much. I'm sorry that I worry, but I'm also going to try to create that autonomy of his authenticity to make mistakes. And they took the totally wrong way down there. It took him like an extra 5 hours, which was already like a 15-hour trip. And I was like, but to pause and be like, okay, that's how they're going to learn. I'm going to lean into the wiggliness of this and let him make mistakes. It's like letting your kid, I think you told the story of your kid on the skating rink one time and trying to learn how to skate. And you're like, oh, can I pick him up? And they're like, nope. Like, let him fall down. Figure out how to get back up. And you're like, oh, they're going to be really mad at me when they get off the ice because I didn't go save them. But that's part of letting them be authentic and how much structure and how much wiggle space. And that's every parent's decision. I actually trust the autonomy of parents that are in self-energy to make a decision, because I really think most parents.
Yeah, I think what you're saying, Leash, is so important. I love so much around this authenticity piece. And I think some of Brene Brown's stuff is really good for that. I remember doing a little workbook thing with my oldest and just finding a picture that was like, where are you authentic you? Find a picture of you where you see you. And it was a young picture of me. I think I was doing cartwheels on the front lawn, if I remember correctly, because that was what I would do. And I remember Emma picked a picture too, my oldest, and just that idea of that became kind of a guiding post for us also of, how do we let them be authentic them, even though we have our own preconceived notion of how we think they're going to be. Like, I thought that you'd be like this. I thought you'd be like this, like in these boxes, right? Because we were raised so much in these different boxes. And then it's like tearing apart the box and being just, I have to let you make mistakes, and I have to trust that you're going to make the choices that are going to be the best in your interest at that moment, because I've been your guiding post to show you some of the ways, and you're going to find your own way. And I think it's a beautiful kind of like, remember the attachment, remember the attunement, but also remember the authenticity. Let them be who they so desire to be, and just be that guiding post for them to say, you can always come back home. I'm always here, but I'm here as a support to your growth of whoever and wherever you're going to go.
Yeah, I'm here as your center of your compass, but I actually want to employ you to choose the direction you want to go in, and how can I support you and guide you, but support you along the way, knowing sometimes the direction you're pointing is the direction I would have pointed it in, but it isn't my journey.
Yeah.
That's a beautiful thing that Rico said. They're not ours. They're a gift. And we get to guide them for as long as possible. And if we actually just land in that center, if we get to guide for as long as possible. And so who would you want to guide you in your life? Be that person for them. Like, who would you want to guide you? Someone that you respect, someone that you honor, someone that you would trust as a mentor, someone whose life you actually would look up to.
Yeah. And if you think kind of age wise, also, if you put yourself in your child's situation of, if they're 6 or they're 12 or they're 16 or whatever age they are, if you put yourself in that age and you go, what would I have wanted from my parent in this moment? What does she or he or they, what do they want from me in this moment? Rather than guiding, like, we're so busy in our own minds of like, I've got this to do, I've got this to do. And we forget to just be present with our kids of just, what do they need from me? I know you and I have talked about this before, and I did kind of do this recently with my kids also after we chatted, but just thinking about, from each of your kids' perspective, how they would, if there was like a movie being made of your family, how would they show, this is what my mom and dad are like, or this is what, my parents or my grandparents or my siblings, like, this is how we do the family. This is what it's like. Every kid is going to have a different perspective. That's going to be a different movie. And it's one of those things that really kind of tears with your mind a little bit when you kind of start to lean into it and think, oh my gosh, what would he say? What would she say? Like, and so just being mindful of that, like, you are the master, regulator. You are the guide in this house. You're the one who's leading the way, you and your partner. So how do you want that to be? What experience do you want to leave them with?
Yeah, so profound. So because we talked about this, so I told you the story. Like, I actually asked them again because it was interesting. So when I didn't ask them on purpose. We were in the car driving with my kids, and my son's girlfriend was, so this is quite a few years ago, was in the back seat of the truck, and they probably like grade 10. And so we're driving, and she said, yeah, I think I'm going to be a psychologist when I get out of school. And I was like, that's a great idea, honey. And my son was like, that's a terrible idea. And I was like, caught me off guard. And I was like, why? What do you think about my job? And he's like, well, I think your job is, I don't know what he said, but basically his gist was like, all you do is work. All you do is focus on work. I never see you. Like, he's like, your job must be terrible because you don't take a day off. And he's like, I don't want anybody to have a job like yours. And I was like, oh, that's how you see me? And he was like, yeah, you're just a workaholic. And I was like, oh, so then I asked him again recently, because I took note. I was like, oh my God, that's how my kid sees me. It's just this working crazy person. And I was like, okay, I need to change that. I need to change how I show up, and how I talk about my job, and how I talk about how I do my job in front of him. Because often they'll see me reading a book, or they'll see me on my iPad doing stuff, and I'm researching for a client, or I'm putting notes together for a client or whatever. But I need to turn that story around. So that's been a few years ago. So then we did this again last night because my daughter's turning 17. We're talking about that. And I was like, hey, how do you see us now? And it was so sweet because she actually got emotional. My daughter, they were sitting together, and she's like, well, I don't want to turn 17 because I love our life so much. And my son was like, yeah, like, why do you think I'm still here? Like, I'm going to be 20 years old and I don't want to leave. Like, our life here is pretty great. Like, I want to be like this. And I was like, yes, message changed, download, receive. Like, I was like, okay.
I'm like, I love that.
Yeah, I made some changes, in this past few years about how I'm going to do my work life. There's no such thing as balance. but how I'm going to do my work life differently and how I'm going to show up because their opinion matters to me. It does. Yeah. Their opinion, how they see, what do I want my kids to, because they're going to take that into their lives and into their parenting. So what do I want my kids to take with them about how their parents raised them? And again, all the mistakes I made too, I'm going to be like, my parents said this really wrong. I'm going to do this with my kids different. Break those cycles for sure. But if I have the power to change it in real time, because I'm asking my kids, what would you say about, who your parents are? What would you say about, your parents' jobs? And then listen. And I said that to you, like, just you ask your kids, Dayna, but just be mindful that you might be like, holy cow, when they tell you their truth.
And then I did. And thankfully I got a good answer too. I was like, oh, was this a trauma memory for you? When we said we were having a third, and it was quite funny. She's like, no, I was so caught off guard though, that I wasn't expecting it at all. And I was just overwhelmed, and overwhelm is a lot. And it just, she had to pull away for a few minutes. Yeah, I love what we're talking about right now, as a way to kind of pull all of this together, of the fact that what we're really trying to do though is we are really just creating a secure relationship in our family of collaboration. I want to know your viewpoint. How do you see us? How would you like us to do this family system differently? How do you see, us as parents and our marriage? How do you see that? How do you think we could do that differently? Like, allowing their perspective and their viewpoint and their feelings to be seen and heard and understood as a collaborative way to do a family as they're aging and getting older. I think that's the most beautiful part about having kids and raising a little family together, is that we get to hear from them. We're like, I always think of the analogy of a business. If as a husband and wife, we're the business owners and these are our little employees. Well, we want to know, how do the employees like work for us? How is this? Do you like this? Do you like this? And so always having that kind of collaborative, mutual, fairness, justice, like that as our theme of, we have your back and we want to hear from you. I know my husband and I, we used to always say to our kids as we were doing things, we'd say, we want to know what your perspective is. Like, ultimately, we're going to make a final decision together, but we want to hear from you. And so at family dinners, we'll say, what do you want? What do you want to do? What do you want to do? And now we're going to come together and negotiate this. So I think that's a really...
Yeah. I love that you make that distinction between, but we're the business owners. Like, we're still in the structure of the castle, we're still at the top of the castle, because I think, we're talking about collaboration and autonomy building, and it's so important. I want to reintegrate that, but it's also just as important to maintain the structure to some degree, because I think, I can think of like kids in my office, or, families I work with in my office, where then parents are negotiating things like finances, or things that are, or a custody if you're a separated parent, or even having a fight about stuff, and kids will then take sides, or feel caught in the middle, or feel stressed about that, right? So I think fight in front of your kids for sure, but fight about the things that they can understand, or things that are age appropriate for those kids, and repair in front of them too. Because if they just see you have a fight, because often I'll hear my dad is this because he said this, or my mom's this, and I would take, and I'm like, whoa, that's parent stuff. Those are the owners have business meetings behind the door. They don't tell the business, the employees everything. They collaborate, want to know, but then they make the ultimate decisions behind closed doors sometimes too. So having a really clear, agreeing with your partner, who's raising the kids with you, that we can discuss this in front of our kids, and that's open policy. And we have, we negotiate, we fight about having for dinner or whatever. Like, we can have some disagreements, but also there's things we do not in front of our kids. And if it happens in front of our kids, we pause, we own it, and we make sure that they're not part of that negotiation. That, hey, we fought about this thing, that's whatever it is, has nothing to do with you guys, and we're good. Don't need to take sides. Don't need to come in here and try to referee us. We're good. And so I don't want the kids, because how many times do we hear in office that the kids own their parent stuff, or they're angry at a parent because they know how much their other parents paying in child support. And I'm like, why do you even know that? Why is it even, I heard them on the phone. And I'm like, okay, that happens sometimes. We're humans. Turn around to your kid and be like, sorry, that's between dad and I, or mom and I. That has nothing to do with you. That's not our negotiation.
Yeah. That structure, what you're referring to, Alicia, of like, there's the husband and wife, or same sex couple, or if you're separated, then you're separated. You might have other, parties, but there's a clear structure of like, there's these two people up here, and then there's these other ones down here. And and let them be kids, because they're going to be adults in life eventually anyway. So let them be the children and the ones that you're guiding. And I mean, that's obviously where the other big impact, person that we've talked about lots is Dr. Stan Tatkin's work. If you can also integrate some of that understanding as a couple, it's massive, because how you are as a couple is going to be the guiding post of how you are as parents. So if you guys aren't being collaborative, if you're not on the same page, then you're going to end up dividing and conquering. And although we do divide and conquer with certain things in relationships, we don't want to be doing that in massive roles of like, no, you're the parent and I'm the one who works. That's an old system that doesn't work all that well. It's not as healthy as being collaborative together.
Yeah. Yeah. Like, I mean, I sell this to parents. I'm sure you do too. Like, one of the best things, if not the best thing you can do for your kids, is work on your relationship. Mm-hmm. Establish clarity in your relationship. So having a healthy relationship and knowing those things and having those discussions will trickle down into the system that your kids live in. So if you want to be, a really good parent, which we all want to do, then invest in your relationship with your partner who's raising a kids with you.
Yes. Yeah. And invest in your relationship with yourself as well, so you can be authentic, so you can be in alignment with what you really want for your life. So the 3 layers, right? The relationship with yourself, the relationship with your partner, and then the relationship with your kids.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
I'd love to hear feedback on this. If you're listening to this podcast, I'd love to hear your feedback on parenting struggles, parenting tips, what was useful, because this is such a precious, vulnerable, and potentially hot topic for people, for maybe like self included. Like it's one of those things that you want to shame someone real quick, give them that look of judgment across the room on their parenting style. You're going to feel that to your core, because it's one of the most precious, important things we do in our life. Right. So I think it's such an important, we need to keep talking about it. This is a conversation starter. This podcast is so important, and I'm really grateful for it. And let's keep the conversation going. So please share your feedback, your opinions, share with others, share with us, like what else, we can't talk about all the parenting things. So there's so many things we could go off on tangents on here, but what else are your pain points, and how else can we serve you, and how else can we create resources and structure and support and love and grace for each other in this.
Yeah. Yes, definitely. And I agree, Alicia. I think that as a closing kind of piece, I feel like the one thing that I always think of in really all of my secure relationships, but since we're talking about parenting, I think, if my relationship comes first, what do I do? Like, these are my little people. If this relationship comes first, what do I do? And then it will always soften me to be like, I need to lead differently. I need to do this thing differently. So just having a visual or a motto, I think that's a really good starting place for even a chat with your partner of what energy do we want in our family? Like, what is that relationship motto, or what is the theme in our family?
Yeah. And then the caveat is, when you do that, when you have that relationship first motto, which I did for my kids' young age, they're going to call you on that. And you're like, but I said so. They're like, that's not relationship first, and that's not collaborative. And right. So my son's like, but he's the one that's going to call me. That's not what we agreed to. So, but again, grateful for that. How lucky we have our kids in a healthy space, call us out to grow us into healthier, better parents.
Yes. Yeah. And, for us as well, when it's, we have your back no matter what, and we get called out on that. Well, are you having my back right now? And then I go, okay, just a sec. Let me figure out how I still have your back, still having my own kind of integrity and values and understanding you. So again, that's that collaborative, that part of the relationship. We're teaching them how to be in relationship, because they don't learn it anywhere else. So, be as good of a teacher as you can be by educating yourself and having a tribe around you of people that can support you and not judge you and help encourage you and listen to the podcast. And for sure, like you said, I'd love to hear back from anybody who has anything else that they'd want to kind of dive more into, or questions or comments. We welcome it and we love it.
And to support for each other, like support for all the parents that are doing this hard thing called parenting, step parents, all parents, grandparents, friend parents. There's lots of mothers my kids have that aren't their biological mother, including you. So other mothers that aren't biological are still included, and fathers and aunts and uncles and all the things. Yeah.
Yeah.
I love this topic. It's such a good topic.
It is definitely. We're passionate about everything relationships, but I think, our kids have impacted us the most. They've shown us the most, colors of who we are and where we come from. So it's an ever evolving journey. That's for sure.
Cheers to our kids and all the kids.
Yes.
All the kids within us.
Totally. Love this.
Okay. Peace.
See you later.
Thanks so much for joining us.
We're really glad you're here with us on this journey.
The best way to support this podcast is to subscribe and give it a 5-star review.
See you next time.
This has been a Bread Dog Studios production.